Hi, Jamie. Welcome to
Hi,
Stylist
Lisa.
Soul Tribe Conversations. I'm so happy you're here today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody listening?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me. I'm Jamie Rogers, in Stylist Soul Tribe from the beginning, kind of.
Forever, it feels like. Uh-huh.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Obviously, I know your whole story. I want to preface, I told Jamie this before we started recording, but for everybody listening, this episode specifically, I can almost guarantee you is going to have nothing to do with business. While Jamie is very smart and intelligent around business, her story personally is so much more inspiring, valuable, unbelievable that it would be a wasted episode to talk anything about business. So just buckle up. I'm just warning you. If you were looking for something to inspire you to like make more money or upgrade your business, like this is the episode. Yeah, if you're dying for like
Literally, in this moment, I couldn't be less like into being a go-getter if I
yeah, and
tried.
I want to hear that whole entire journey. So obviously, Jamie, I know you so well. Jamie has been in and out of Soul Tribe since day one. She is one of the OGs. She left Soul Tribe for a little bit and then came back. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I know everyone in the OGs really well, but maybe it's just because your story is so special and so unique. I feel like I know you on a different level. Like maybe because you allow me to go there, maybe because we've just had those really deep dive conversations. So I pretend like you're not necessarily talking to me because obviously I know your story, talking to everyone else. Tell them a little bit about who you are and start to tell your story, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, you definitely know me on a deeper level because when I started Stylist Soul Tribe the first go around, one of the first things that came up for me to do, or I was doing, because you introduced it to me,
Mm-hmm.
was Miracle Morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a really, really bad space, um, mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And I've been in bad spaces before. But this was different. This was just super deep. This involved my super close family, my mom and my
Mm-hmm.
sister, and it, having to work through things in our relationship.
Yeah.
And
Tricky
I would
season of
definitely,
life for
yes,
sure.
yes. And it was just I was on fire with it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I joined Soul Tribe. And you had mentioned about Miracle Morning, and I was definitely not in the place to focus on work. I needed to focus on myself first. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I started a practice of that every morning. And what I think gave me the ability to be open to that, so now we'll rewind,
Yeah.
is when I was 22 years old, I got clean and sober. Um, Cocaine was my drug of choice. I weighed about 90 pounds when I went into rehab. I had a TIA, which is a mini stroke,
Mm.
when I was 3 days clean. And my mom moved to Florida in the time I was in rehab. And when I got out, I needed to find somewhere to live. And I did. I lived with strangers off of Craigslist.
Mm.
The first one was a guy, and he was super nice, Jehovah
Thank
Witness.
God.
So maybe that was good.
Yeah.
And then I had a roommate, Jen, after that, who's still one of my dearest friends, but she was a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had no idea how to work and deal with the city. I was working in Manhattan at the time.
Mm.
Well, this is a few months in.
Yeah.
Um, I got a job in Manhattan working in property management, doing the phones. And then I worked at night doing co-check. And
Mm.
I'd get a jar of sauce and a box of pasta, and that's what I had for the week.
Mm.
And um, let's see, I had to ask Kevin, my husband now, who was
Mm-hmm.
my boyfriend then, um, how I knew which train to take, how I knew if I had to go on the uptown train or the downtown train. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, well, if the number is higher than where you are, you want to go uptown. I'm
Mm.
like, it's really that simple. had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really that simple.
Okay,
And
pause. Because
yes,
obviously this is your story, so you know the whole big picture, and I'm trying to think
yeah,
of somebody
I'm
listening.
skipping
I'm gonna, yeah,
parts.
I'm gonna keep interrupting you. So she said, she was 22 when she got clean and sober, and you just hit the 22-year anniversary of that. So just to give some
Yes,
context to this timeline, somebody's like, "Are you 25 right now? Are you 70? Like what?" So to give some context, this was
yes,
22 years ago. You've lived a lot of life. Can you go back even a little bit more, maybe if you're comfortable with it? We also were I'm just going to be transparent with everybody listening to this. And I think it's important for people to think about this when they're listening to podcast episodes. It takes a lot to share like a deep dive into your story, like Jamie is doing. I know because I've shared some deep dives into my own story, and I'm really mindful of like my digital footprint. I'm really mindful of when I tell stories about my life, and especially if it has to do with other people, like that podcast is going to live on the internet forever. Sure, I could delete it, but like I'm just very thoughtful of that. And so I want Jamie to be thoughtful of that as well. Would you mind going back a little bit into like active addiction, maybe when you met Kevin, how that all came about, just so we can get a little bit of an even more clear picture?
absolutely.
Okay.
So my addiction came from, it's actually quite a few different things. I wasn't a big drinker. I wasn't drunk when I was 12. In my mom's liquor cabinet, like I don't, that's not my story. So taking it to a few places, because I think all of them are actually pretty important.
Yeah.
There's a history of sexual assault in my family, not by a family member, but within my family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a history of abandonment in my
Mm-hmm.
family. Um, Me, especially
Yeah.
with my stepfather. And that goes on to another story. And then there's also on a different level. So that's like the emotional part, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was super young, my mom would drop me off in kindergarten and I would cut kindergarten. Okay. I would walk home and make eggs.
And
And
nobody was home?
nobody was home.
You were 5 years old. She'd drop you off. You would
I
sneaky
in
ditch
kindergarten.
school.
Yes, I
No
didn't want to be
way.
at
That
school, and
is
I would watch soap
crazy.
operas and make eggs. And it got to the point where the school nurse and the police, yeah,
Mm,
would show up at my house to get me.
mm-hmm,
So that's how my mom became an entrepreneur who anything she decides to do work wise turns to gold. But
mm,
anyway, that's how she started working at home.
yeah.
So I've had major ADD from when I
Mm-hmm,
was little,
mm-hmm.
cutting school in kindergarten, talks
School
too
just
much in
wasn't for you. You've
class.
known from as
And
long as you can remember back you
it
didn't
was
like being
not
there.
for me.
Mm,
So when I was young, I love the social aspect of it,
mm-hmm,
not the learning so much. So when I was young, I don't remember what grade I was in, but definitely elementary school, I was
mm-hmm,
diagnosed with ADD and I
mm-hmm,
was put on Ritalin.
mm,
And I remember the feeling of it working, like it
mm.
feeling like focus. And I just remember the feeling of it.
Like, oh
And
wow, something
then,
must have actually been wrong if this medicine makes me
yes,
feel normal.
yes,
Yeah, or whatever. You didn't even know what normal was back then. Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
And then things happened within my family. My family imploded, and that fell to the wayside.
Mm,
And then we started moving all the time.
mm,
And I was a new kid. I changed schools. One school I kept coming back to, so it's not actually 8 schools, but I changed schools 8 times from
wow.
8th grade to 10th grade.
Wow.
And now I'm not on meds or anything like that. I started smoking cigarettes super young. I was
Hmm.
never into
Do
alcohol.
you feel like back then, like nicotine was almost like gave you
Well,
focus in the same way because it's a stimulant?
yes, and that was
Mm-hmm.
my last drug that I gave up. I smoked for like 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And to fast forward to that,
Yeah.
when now I'm clean and whatever, and I'm smoking cigarettes, I have my kids, and I didn't want to be a smoking mom, and I quit smoking, and I ended up in the psychiatrist's office, like in a breakdown. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is not just normal quitting, something is wrong. And I told him about the ADD briefly, and he was like, well, let's look into that more.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so we did all these tests. Now I'm a recovered cokehead, so
Yeah.
the medication for ADD is scares me because,
Stimulants, yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's what was needed. And he
Mm,
said that was why I was so drawn to it.
mm-hmm.
Because initially it's like, oh, this feels
It
like
kind of fixes that chemical
normal.
imbalance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, I took it to an extreme and whatever.
Yeah.
But so there's the emotional part of like just not knowing what to do with myself. And then there was a big, huge part of like the psychological with the medicines. Had I been medicated, who knows if
Yeah.
where that would have went, you know?
Wow.
I mean, that would change my whole story and I wouldn't want to change anything in my story.
Totally.
But I know a lot of parents just from being in the salon,
Yeah.
will talk about this with their kids and not wanting to medicate them and
Mm.
whatever. And I'll give them a heads up, just letting you know if they get their hands on, if they truly have a problem and they get their hands on stimulants, be prepared for them
Mm.
to be addicted to them.
Wow.
Yeah. So now
Yeah.
I'm off track. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where the addiction came
I could
from.
have gone off track with you. I just stopped myself. I could have gone even deeper down that, but I don't think that would be necessary. Okay, tell us maybe you meeting Kevin, because you met him in like the
Yeah.
deep, deep, dark part of your addiction, right?
So Kevin and I have the ultimate love story. I don't know what I would do without my husband. I absolutely
Yeah.
adore him. So when I was in rehab, when I was 3 days clean, I was smoking a cigarette outside and everything started like tingling,
Mm.
like from my head down to my legs, and my face fell. And I started walking to the nurse, and I couldn't continue the walk to the nurse's office. And I just lost all movement in the left side of my body.
Mm.
And I was terrified. And somebody else that was there, got the nurse or whatever, and they sent me in an ambulance to the hospital. And I had a TIA, which is a mini stroke. And there was a nurse that was working in the hospital. I don't know her name. I don't remember anything about her, just that she was a Black woman and she was super nice. And she
Mm-hmm.
stayed next to my bed and she prayed on rosaries,
Mm.
Jubilee rosaries, they were called.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, everything, and now I wasn't raised under any religion. So this
Yeah.
was like a foreign thing for me. And the next day, everything had come back. My face had come back. My mom flew
Wow.
in from Florida and was there the next day, very briefly. Like I just saw her for a little bit, and then they
Mm-hmm.
sent me back to rehab.
Okay.
So I get back to the rehab, and now the nurse left those rosaries. I never saw her again, but she left the rosaries next to my bed.
Mm.
And I still have them in a
Mm.
box on my shelf. Um, I went back to the rehab and now I'm just like happy to be alive.
Yeah.
At 22 years old, whatever.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in rehab. I wanted desperately to be there. I just
You were
waited
ready
for
to be done.
I was waiting for somebody to pay attention, to
Mm.
notice.
Mm.
I was so skinny. It was unbelievable. Like zeros fell off of me. It was
Mm.
unbelievable. And like that's something that is a topic that's completely off for discussion, like when it comes to certain people in my family, is like
Mm.
weight and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not up for
Yeah.
discussion.
Fair that that's a
Anyway,
trigger for you. Yeah.
very much so. And
Mm-hmm.
so I come back and everyone, had been praying for me when I was in the hospital. And I walk up to this guy sitting at the table. I hadn't seen him, and hey, I'm Jamie. What's your name? Kevin. In his deep voice, not wanting to, talk. Huh? I can't understand what you're saying. Kevin. I, dude, I can't. You're like marbles.
Speak.
Kevin! He screams at me. I'm like, you don't have to yell. All right, I got it. Kevin, nice to meet you. And he goes to pick up his fruit punch and he
This
has
was
the
in rehab or this
shakes.
was at the
This was in
hospital?
rehab.
Okay,
This was
Kevin
in
was in
rehab.
rehab too. Okay.
Yes. He had come in the time I was gone.
Okay.
And he goes to pick up his juice. And yes, this is not, no one would suggest dating somebody in rehab, but whatever. We
I
didn't date
mean,
in
this is a
rehab.
true story. Let's hear
Yes,
it.
this is a true story. So
Yeah.
he goes to pick up his juice and he has the shakes
Mm.
so bad that it's spilling all over the
Assuming
table.
his problem was alcohol.
Alcohol. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, this guy's fucked up. I just
Hmm.
stroked out. Who am I to judge?
Yeah.
And he loved me from hello. He followed me around. I had a boyfriend who was a fireman who was awful, who was so much older than me and
Mm.
whatever. And that was more of like a daddy issue relationship.
Yeah.
And Kevin was just my friend. Like we were in a group together. We knew the absolute worst about each other
Hmm.
that you could possibly know sitting in group
Yeah.
therapy in
Yeah.
rehab. And I got out before him because I was there sooner. And when he would say that when I walked in, like, oh, this is the girl we've been praying for all this time. Okay.
Hmm.
And he was my friend when we got out. He brought me things that mattered. Like I had to find a job. I didn't have anything. My mom was like, I
Hmm.
sold the house. You have a month before the new people move in to
Wow.
find somewhere to live. She moved to Florida. She was gone to find somewhere to live.
Hmm.
And I was a disaster.
Yeah.
Just the hardest time in my entire life was getting through
Hmm.
that. And then my boyfriend at the time, the fireman person, had cheated on me, and the girl showed up at my door.
Yikes.
Yeah. So then I was devastated, because
Hmm.
I was devastated over every relationship that ended
Hmm.
because I
You had
loved
attachment
you.
issues.
The more you were not interested, the more I loved you,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And Kevin would show up with a coffee pot
Hmm.
because I didn't have a coffee pot. He would get me pizza delivered to my apartment, and I couldn't afford to go and buy a pizza,
Yeah.
like things that mattered. And he
He looked
lived in the
after you.
Bronx, and yes, he lived in the Bronx, and I lived on Long Island. And the best gift ever was an Easy Pass because I couldn't afford the tolls. And I
Mm.
would sit in traffic forever to get there. So the Easy Pass was the greatest gift ever.
Yeah.
And we were friends for like a year. And I made a pass at him first, and he rejected me. And I was
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, you're gay. Like, I didn't know. He's like, no.
He was probably
He,
trying to follow the rules. You're not
no,
supposed to
he
date
was
someone you
like,
meet in rehab.
he told me, um, I don't think it was a full year. I feel like a year is when we became a couple. So maybe
Okay.
like 6 months or something.
He thought you should
Um,
give it more time.
he said, I have loved you since day one and you're not ready for this and
Oh.
you will destroy me. And I want this to be for real.
Oh.
And we can't be for real until you're ready for
Yeah.
this. And then our first kiss was at the Jersey Shore.
Oh my gosh.
Random one night. And that rosary from the nurse
Hmm.
I wore as my something old on our wedding day.
Oh, that's really
And
beautiful.
like Kevin, I would park like how I was saying I didn't know how to go uptown, downtown. I got my sister's hand-me-down car and I would park in Jackson Heights and Queens at the train, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was a
Hmm.
disaster. I was always
Hmm.
late, hours late. So I would just park wherever. It didn't matter what the sign said. Clearly, they were just for show
Yeah.
until I got home, late at night, because now I'd go from work in an office to a restaurant doing code check. So I'm getting home at like midnight. And it was right after 9/11. So the cops
Mm.
were all in the subways with like the big, huge guns and
Yeah.
whatever, which actually made me feel like really safe.
Yeah.
And my car would be towed. And what? Like, clearly it was stolen. Like,
Yeah.
it couldn't have been towed. And I called Kev, and he was at a Ranger game with his brother. And I'm like, my car is gone. And I'm a disaster. And he left the Ranger game to come
Mm.
and and help me. I'd reach out to my mom and she's like, oh, I don't know what to tell you. Good luck.
Yeah.
And he called around and found my car, and it was, $10 at the time was 100.
Yeah.
So a few hundred to get my car was a
No,
million,
say goodbye to
like
the
I
car.
did not,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I did
Yeah.
not have it.
Mm.
And he helped me with those things. He didn't help me with like frivolous things. He helped me
Yeah.
with things that were really important.
That
Oh,
helped you get on your feet and have you be in a position where you could continue to work on yourself and stay clean.
and now he's also working on his beginning of sobriety
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
so one frivolous story, this is a drug story. um the boyfriend had bought me a digital camera right at the end of my partying days, and I sold it for drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't know I sold it for drugs. That was my last night out. I'll never forget that
Mm-hmm.
night. And he was coming over, and it was for my birthday, and he bought me a printer for the camera.
Mm.
I
Camera's
don't
gone.
I don't have the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
It's all right. You can sell
Kevin,
the printer in a few
what am I
days.
supposed to do? What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, how do I? And he went out and bought me the camera, so I didn't have to tell him that I had
Oh.
sold it.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's the kind of guy Kevin is. And
Yeah.
our to watch our daughters grow
Mm.
up in a household of parents that just love each other so much
Yeah.
and who are sober, like there's not, has been like living in a social experiment.
Mm.
My teenage daughters, we're supposed to not like them at this point or whatever. I adore my kids
Yeah.
so much, and they have so much respect for our life.
Mm.
And
Can I
they,
ask you a question just out of
yeah,
my own curiosities?
yes,
How have you guys shared your stories with the kids? Because
I
honestly, we
am
haven't like majorly crossed into that yet. We don't not share it, but we haven't fully gone there. And I'm wondering at what age and how you went about that
always,
from day one.
always, yes. I have lived, and sorry, mom, if you hear this, but I grew up in a house of lies.
Mm.
um Different times, right? Just
Yeah,
whatever, different times.
that's true.
Things,
Yeah.
the things that you don't realize were ever going to come to fruition in society have,
Mm-hmm.
become possible
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
So no judgment on it, but um I would never wanted to do that to my kids. That
Mm.
I never wanted to have to go back onto something that I had told them,
Mm.
and it's a different story. Like the reality is
Mm-hmm.
a different story. And I started telling them about that, like that we don't drink alcohol right
Mm-hmm.
away. And
Mm-hmm.
then honestly, the reality of it, like how we met each other and everything,
Yeah.
I want to say Nat was maybe like 10.
Mm. Yeah.
Young. They were,
Yeah.
I'm proud of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like when people will comment on like social, like, you should be so proud. Yeah, totally proud. Like
Mm-hmm.
100% great. My favorite story of all time is Kevin and I never saw um my addiction as being this awful
Yeah.
person. Like
Yeah. I
I
guess
never did.
I'm again being mindful of digital footprint, thinking about where I want to go. I'm just gonna share it, whatever. I mean, my kids are still young, 7 and 11, and we definitely have never lied about anything. They know that there's stuff there, but Ryan has said I'm just not ready to
Yeah.
share it. I'll share when you get
Yeah.
older. But Ryan has also been to prison, and so there's been like things that have come up where it's been like, oh, bad guys go to jail, or like there's only bad guys in prison, like we have a hard time navigating that because it's like, well,
Yeah.
no, this guy right here has actually had that story, but he's trying, and we've had these conversations. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this. We've had these conversations of like, do we save that for the age that they start?
Okay, so well, okay, so yes, with that, it was much easier to address alcohol with
Yeah.
them. Like as far as drugs,
Yeah.
I mean, my sister-in-law died of an overdose
Mm.
um a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had, I don't remember how old they were, but I want to
Mm-hmm.
say, and Natalie is 16 now. So I
Yeah.
want to say she was at least 11 or 12. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just came. It just, when
Yeah.
it felt right, it
Mm-hmm.
happened,
I
you
think we've had a
know?
few of those moments where we're like, we could go there right now, should we? And that's when Ryan would say, give me a little bit. Like, so they know that there's a story there. They do know that.
So
Um,
I think that Ryan still has some shame in that. And that's why he's
mm,
not ready for that. I don't
yeah,
have any shame
fair.
in my game with
Mm,
that. And I like, okay, so on another topic of this
hmm
and secrets and all of that stuff, I was raised thinking my stepfather was my father.
Yeah, let's
And
get into that story because we are like 30 minutes in. And okay,
okay,
let me
okay.
just say this real quick. So you guys are all probably listening. I'm hoping you're like, oh my God, I could listen to Jamie talk for days because that's how I feel. But I'm not even kidding you guys. We haven't even gotten to like the part of the story that I'm like, your life is a literal movie. What is going on? So, Bed of Lies. Look how the world has evolved and what has
Yes.
come.
And
Go ahead and
that's a
start to tell
huge
that
part.
story.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was, I want to say I was like 10. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I think I was like 10 years old. Um, Although my stepfather seems to remember me younger
Mm,
because we were just talking about it recently.
hmm
I asked my older sister,
hmm
how come there's no pictures of dad in my baby book?
mm.
And she responded with, he's not your real dad.
Simple as that.
Oh, um, going back, I don't remember things that were said, but I noticed this just throughout like the course of things. I remember how I felt
Mm,
with moments. And I remember feeling that doesn't mean you're not gonna like be my dad anymore, right? Like I
hmm
loved my dad. I was a daddy's girl. I did everything. I loved my dad. I had no interest in him not being my father. I
Yeah.
was never someone who was like, oh, you're not my real dad anyway.
hmm
And I have a very hard time with some clients or, friends or whatever that are in this kind of situation with their kids and it not being, lying to their kids about who their parents are.
Mm,
I think kids are so much more able to take something at face value and process
mm,
it, and it's not attached to all this negative stuff that adults
hmm
attach it to. They see
mm,
it black and white. They don't
mm.
have a
They don't have all
history
those
of,
stories, all that
no,
shame. Wow, that's a really good
no, they
point.
don't have hangups that are
Mm,
making it skewed,
mm,
right? So the longer you wait, the more skewed the story becomes,
mm.
right? And now
Yeah.
you're a liar.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've told all these stories.
Mm,
I mean, there were like fake things written in my baby book. um,
mm,
anyway, I love my dad. So when I found that out, it was, oh, but it was never, oh, like you're, screw you or anything like
No,
that
if
at
anything, it was
all.
almost like, oh gosh, you're not leaving me, are
Yes,
you?
a hundred
Yeah.
percent, a hundred
Mm,
percent. And then things happened in our family, and I did lose him.
mm-hmm.
Um, he made some really not nice choices. We've worked through that, so I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but
Mm-hmm.
it was horrendous. He never like did anything to me, like
For sure.
physically or
Every
anything
family
like
has their
that.
deep, deep stuff. Yeah.
But just abandonment. And he
Mm-hmm.
is my younger sister's dad, so he would still come to get my sister. I went
Mm,
from having a huge family, tons of cousins and aunts and uncles and whatever, to nobody, to just
mm-hmm.
my mom. And my older sister joined the military and was gone, and my younger sister lived with her dad a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like it. Like Christmas was, that was done.
Yeah.
And like all those things, so fast forward to, he comes to visit me, my stepfather, in
Mm-hmm.
rehab with his dad. His dad was a really good man. He's since passed away, but my grandfather, and sat him down and said, I know you are here because of my son. He had nothing to say. My stepfather had nothing to say, but my grandfather dragged him along through that.
Yeah. Fair.
And we have really, really had it out. And I've held that fucking guy accountable for everything. And that's why we're good.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're good. If I let things just like go, I would have so much resentments. And I don't, because I literally hold him accountable for everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, so fast forward, here it takes another turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a client who is into genealogy. And, I'm telling her my mom moved to America from Australia when she was pregnant with me, 8 months pregnant with me. My dad and my mom were not a relationship, I mean, if for anyone out there that wants to have any ounce of judgment, you are so full of shit and
Fuck
just lucky
off.
you didn't get
Yeah.
pregnant.
Go away.
And
Yeah.
if you did, you probably would have made the opposite choice, because I can't
Mm-hmm.
say I would have made the same decision my mom made, which was
Yeah.
incredibly brave to keep a daughter on her own.
Yeah.
So just had to put that disclaimer out.
Fair.
So my mom moves to America, pregnant with me. My grandparents were here for something, but she was from Australia. And so I have a client. I would daydream about who my dad was, but it was so like far gone. And
Mm-hmm.
Australia is like the other, literally another
Yeah.
planet,
Yeah.
especially back then,
Yeah.
And
And
I have
would
a
you ask your
client.
mom questions and she genuinely had no idea who it was, or do you think she kind of
I
knew, or
I would I don't want to get too much into my mom,
fair?
but I would ask her questions, and she didn't have anything to tell me.
Okay. You took matters into your own hands, which we have the
Yeah,
ability to do now in this
yeah,
day and
and
age.
and if somebody didn't ask me about it or tell me about like the
Like
DNA thing,
plant that
I don't
seed.
know. Yeah, I don't know if I would have done it.
Mm,
It was still new then, so I can't say.
okay.
So I probably would have actually, but who am I kidding?
Eventually. But
So
it's not like it had been
yeah,
on your mind for a long time and you were waiting and you just never even thought about it.
I thought about it the most after I had my kids.
Okay.
After I had Natalie, my older one, it really came to the surface with me,
Yeah.
and I wanted to know.
Yeah,
That's
you want to know
when,
family medical history. You want to know
yeah,
where I love this baby so much. Like, where did I come from? What is a piece of
yeah,
her? I totally understand that.
and that brought up the anger with me then too for the
Mm-hmm.
first time.
Yeah.
Before I took this on, this was very much my mom's story,
Mm.
and I just kind of went with it,
Yeah.
and respected her in that regard, and then took ownership of this myself. So I do my DNA, and it sits on a website. And for anyone out there doing DNA, you can do it. So say you do it on Ancestry, you can save the data that you get on Ancestry, and you can upload that onto all the other sites.
Mm.
So you don't have to do a DNA test per site. Sometimes I don't think people realize
I
that.
didn't know that.
So I saved it, and I went in, and well, my client recommended my mom do it also. So
Mm.
when I get a response, I know if it's maternal or paternal.
Mm.
So she does it. And I save her data as soon as I get it, like scared she's going to change her mind and be like, forget it. So sorry, mom, I stole your data. And
Thanks
I
for your
put it onto
DNA.
a few sites, and I get a hit like a few years into somebody related to my dad, like cousin wise or whatever. Super nice guy. We have no idea though. I don't know who my cousins have slept with and who they
Super distant.
possibly, and
Yeah.
yeah. So I was happy and content if he was the only person that I
Was that
found, because
cousin
he
in
was really
Australia?
nice. No.
Okay.
So my dad, hold on, that's gonna jump ahead. So
Okay.
one day I'm sitting on the couch in April. I don't remember the year now because 2020, everything just turned into one
Yeah.
year.
It was definitely past 20 because it was right like coming up to the retreat. I want to say it was
So,
2022.
2022. Yes,
Okay.
because it'll be 2 years this
Yeah.
April.
Yeah.
God, what a short time, right? So
Yeah.
I we're watching TV and it goes to commercial and Kevin gets up to go to the bathroom and for whatever reason, no idea why, I don't have any notification or anything. I open up My Heritage, which is one of the better apps for overseas. Ancestry things for overseas, by the way.
Okay.
So I open it up and there's a match on there. And this is right after Soul Tribe retreat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think like a few weeks,
Mm-hmm.
very short
You
after.
just did some like deep personal
Deep,
growth.
deep, deep. I met Kristen, who plays a
Mm-hmm.
huge part in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, deep and made such connections that I so needed,
Yeah.
which I've been terrible at maintaining. I realized just how much of an introvert I am.
The love is there.
And yeah, but I need to get out of that.
Okay.
I needed desperately at that time. It's just all aligned. So I open it up and I have a match on there. And it says that this person is either my uncle or my brother. And based off of his age, clearly he is my uncle.
Mhm.
So I send him a message. Hi. You're probably super surprised to see this. Your brother doesn't know that I exist. So this isn't something that is a secret that he has kept, or anything like that. You know, my mom moved to America when she was 8 months pregnant with me. They met at a place called the Village Green, um, in Melbourne. That's where they used to, or Melbourne, if you're Australian. That's where
Mhm.
they hung out. Um, if I'm going to cause any problems in a family, in a marriage, I'm not interested in doing that. I don't want to break up like somebody's family.
Yeah.
So please let me know if that is the case because I do not want to pursue this if it is.
Yeah.
That was a big one for me. You know, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And, whatever. So the girls in Soul Tribe go down this black hole and literally have my entire family line.
All the
Courtney
detectives
Brown
got to
has
work.
my whole family line figured out by like the end of the
Yeah.
day.
That's so funny.
And it was definitely weird with my mom. She
Fair.
was not prepared for this to become a thing,
Yeah.
you know and this is where I go back with your husband, where it's because there's a shame there,
Mm.
and I see it as, oh my god, you made like a choice to have a child like on your own, like that's the bravest thing ever.
Yeah, like I'm
And
not judging you, mom.
I like,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
what, and whoever is, who cares.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she took it to that place, and we had to really work through that.
Yeah.
So April, I don't remember the dates. I'm gonna try to
Mm-hmm.
pretend I do, but I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do this energy work with Kristen,
Mm-hmm.
sitting outside of going in for a biopsy on my boob or to get it back, to get the
Mm-hmm.
results back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only time like we could do it. And so I do this call with her and I needed to let go of this anger and stuff with my mom. Like I didn't want to be in that space and I
Mm-hmm.
just needed it to go away.
Yeah.
And so we worked through it and Kristen took this picture of these crazy like sun rays and stuff going
Mm-hmm.
on. And I go home after this appointment and Kevin and I are watching TV and I'm laying on the floor and now I have the notification set on this app, right? And I get a message. Hi, Jamie. My name is Joseph McClelland. I live in Australia. So my dad was one, and basically I'm your biological father.
Yeah. Based on what my
My
brother has shared with me. Yeah.
my dad moved to Australia from Scotland when he was 18. He's the only one that lives in Australia.
Mm.
So there's four brothers, and that's how they knew it was him because he's the
Yeah.
only one that lives there.
And he'd
And
spent
he
some time at that place you
literally
mentioned.
still lives in the same neighborhood.
Wow.
Like he showed me the village green when I
Where
went there.
you
It
were
still
conceived.
exists. It's still like I think they at least went to an apartment. The place is still there, like
Yeah.
wild. Meanwhile, I've been like all over the place, and he still lives in the same place.
Wow.
And oh my God, my whole body started tingling. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. And I just keep repeating, oh my God.
I can't
And
even
Kevin's
imagine.
like, what? And
Yeah,
I
he's like, who
throw
did someone
my
die?
phone at
What's going on?
him
Yeah.
like it was on fire. I was like,
Mm.
I got a letter from my dad. And he's, what? And I just start crying.
Oh,
And my daughters come out. And this is where I'm so grateful I've always been honest with
they
them.
know the depth of it.
Because it's
Yeah.
not like, oh, by the way, remember I told your
Uh-huh.
grandpa, whatever. No,
Mm-hmm.
they've known. And
Yeah.
they got to come along this whole journey with me for real,
Yeah.
like, so we talked. The first time was May 21st.
Mm-hmm.
We emailed back and forth a little bit. And the first time we talked on the phone was May 21st. And we got along. I'm going to cry.
Mm.
Um, like he was my dad. Like
Yeah.
he, we talked the first night and then he called in the morning. So that was like late at night for them because they're literally upside down time wise. And I'm leaving for work and he's calling and I'm like, oh my God, he's calling me again.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk twice. And he's like, I just wanted to hear your voice again. And he was so excited.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what I was saying. I honestly never got beyond like wondering what my dad looked like
Yeah.
and if he was a hands-on person, because that's the kind of
Mm.
person that I am. And that was it. Like I never thought about what his personality would be like, or if he had kids, like none of
Yeah.
that. And he has a daughter and a son. So I have a brother and a biological sister
Mm-hmm.
over there. And his wife and daughter had a very hard time with this. Um, Whatever. And he had pulled back a little bit from me.
Mm-hmm.
And when he called, finally, I think it was like just a week, but honestly, it felt like forever. This
Yeah.
was so much stuff.
Yeah. So much
And
life
Lisa,
happened
like
in
you
that
were
period
there
of
through that. Like
time.
there were times where
Mm-hmm.
I called like just hysterical. Like I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what to do with some of
Yeah.
this. And the best thing that I did do was I never put that on my dad.
Mm.
Like I would have with a boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
as a teenager and in my 20s or whatever, I would have suffocated them.
Mm.
And I was so aware to not do that with him and give him
Mm.
his time and his space. But man, I was a wreck to
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
and I turned to my friends and my husband, and I didn't have my mom to turn to. And I didn't have my sisters, like, because no one could really understand what this meant for
It's
me,
complicated. Yeah.
and they still don't.
Yeah.
And he called, and I knew that this was the only opportunity. I wasn't going to miss this opportunity to tell him my dad's story. And I kind of feel like I can't tell all of this without telling a little bit of my dad's story. But
Mm-hmm.
something had happened in my family when I was young, and I
I
never
want
told
to just step
anybody.
in. When you're referring to your dad, this is your technically
Stepfather.
stepdad, just so that people
Yes.
listening aren't getting confused. Technically, stepdad that raised you
Yes.
to you
Yes.
was your dad. Yeah.
Yes. So when I was young, something had happened in my family, and I didn't tell anybody. And then something worse happened in my family, and I
Okay.
carried a lot of guilt over that.
We can leave it at
And
that. Yeah.
then a few years later, something happened with another person, and I told because I
Mhm.
didn't want anything to happen again
Yeah.
and carry that guilt.
Yeah.
And my stepfather chose the person over me
Mm-hmm.
and married his sister.
Mm-hmm.
And they are still married to this day.
Yeah.
And I don't care about that being out there.
Okay.
Um,
I think you're being vague.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and I told my dad this story, my biological real dad, Joe
Mm-hmm.
McClelland, and he cried. And after that, I said to him, I go, I can handle anything that you say to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you decide you don't want to do this anymore, this is too much, thanks, no thanks, please just don't ghost me.
Mm.
I have such issues with being
Yeah.
ghosted.
You're like, I've done so much work on myself to repair these wounds. Please don't
Yeah,
rip them
please,
open.
please
Mm-hmm.
don't. And he never pulled back from me again.
Mm-hmm.
And he had such a hard time that he couldn't be there for me when I was little.
Yeah.
And just our relationship just went to a different level, where some people would be like, oh, you told him that? Yeah, I told him that. What do you, I've been waiting my whole
It's
life for
a
this. I have
integral part
no,
of who you are. Yeah.
absolutely. And I have just so much pride in the things that I did, which I don't know if I realized then, like
Mm-hmm.
standing up for myself and being like, no, this happened. Like I
Yeah.
could have just easily said, okay, no, it didn't, and got
Mm-hmm.
my stepfather and the whole family back, but it did, and I wasn't
Yeah.
taking that back.
Yeah.
And him and I just grew, and
Mm-hmm.
we had so many similarities. We were the same person,
Mm-hmm.
honestly.
Yeah.
Our blunt honesty with also trying not to be hurtful and being aware if we are hurtful and
Yeah.
apologizing and whatever. Like, just he was my spiritual twin, and
Mm-hmm.
he had cancer, prostate cancer, right before COVID. At the same time, my older sister had cancer. Um, that
So when Jamie
November.
meets her biological dad in Australia, he already knew at that time that he was
Yes.
battling cancer.
Yes. So he had prostate.
How long did he wait to share that with you?
He told me that from the beginning.
Okay.
So that he had prostate cancer.
Okay.
And then in September, basically he had surgery and they didn't remove it all. There was like a
Hmm.
piece still there or
They
whatever.
couldn't. Hmm.
So that September, I wish I knew the years better. 2022, we said?
Yeah, 2022 is when you found him, so it would have
Yeah.
either been
So
that September, yeah.
yeah, 2022.
Yeah.
He told me that it had spread to his bones.
Mm.
And with that, I decided I was going. I had already booked a trip for
I just
me,
have full
Kevin,
body
and the
chills.
girls
Hmm.
to go in February.
Yeah.
And I decided I was going. That was it. I'll never forget it when he told me. I got off the phone and I sat on the floor of my suite and just cried like I don't remember the last time I cried so
Yeah.
hard. And I didn't ask if I could come. I just booked it.
Yeah.
And he was away with his family. I reached out to my brother, wanted to make sure there was nothing going on at that certain, that week or whatever,
Yeah.
that he knew of. And he said no. And I booked the trip, and he got back from vacation, and I asked him, are you free October 27th for lunch? Because I'll be in the neighborhood. And he was so excited.
Ugh.
And he was so excited this whole time,
Yeah.
and was up against a wife and a daughter who were livid
Yeah.
over this,
I can't help but
just
empathize with that
livid.
too, because he loves them, but I think he was
Yes,
really good at compartmentalizing that. Like,
he
these are
absolutely
two
was.
incredibly important things to me, and if you guys have feelings about it, I understand and I love you through it, but like this is what's happening. Yeah.
And knowing his health, like it
Mhm.
just,
There wasn't time to waste.
I think I've just have been around such awful men
Yeah.
that I couldn't imagine taking such a good one for granted. Like, what a luxury to be able to take that for granted.
Mm.
Like clearly you have no idea what it's like to not have that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Fair.
And so I reached out to, I would talk to my brother and I'm like, so when I get there, like, I'll get an Uber to the hotel or whatever. And he's like, Jamie, hold on. Do you think Dad's not going to pick you up at the airport? Like he would
Yeah.
ride a bike to pick you up at the airport. Like
Mhm.
there's no way you're not getting picked up. And he had somebody record it
The
when I
video
met
is
him.
really amazing.
That like honestly having that. And I was a stranger because he went
Yeah.
to the airport by himself.
Himself.
And every time we would show up for the day, we would have on the same color family shirt. Like we ordered the same things to eat. He brought me a little stuffed koala bear because he would have given that to me as a little girl.
Mm.
That's what he met me with at the airport. And it was just magical. It was the most amazing week of my entire life.
Yeah.
And it was so hard to come home from there, but I was ready for like my support system back. It was exhausting too, like the timing of literally being upside down and whatever. It was the greatest week of my life. And then we went again in February, and all of us, and he got to meet his granddaughters and Kevin, who he I think Kevin was one of his biggest saving graces in this, knowing that I have, he's an older guy. So sorry if anyone's gonna think that this is, an old school way of thinking, I'm
Nobody's gonna
sure.
judge. Go ahead.
But I had somebody taking care of my heart, like
Yeah.
that loves me.
We
And
all need that.
Kevin gave him peace,
Mm.
like he knew I was all right.
Yeah.
And he just loved Kevin. He called him mate all the time. I don't think he ever even called him Kevin anymore because Kev would only go if he called him mate. And we went and had an amazing time. And then he got really sick
Yeah.
and he passed away
Yeah.
on January 8th. And
Mm. Which we're recording this January 30th. So like when she said and he yeah, like
he
that
just
just as
passed
fast
away.
as that story came in and just as
It went
fast as the
out.
amount of life that you've lived. Yeah.
And there's a part of me that feels like I'm supposed to be um, in a ball in the corner.
Yeah.
And I feel a little weird that I don't feel like that.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm going to put this in briefly, but right in September 27th, my 2.5-year-old niece died unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And a loss like that just brings so much perspective.
Yeah.
And I could get so stuck in, just having him for such a short time and whatever.
Yeah.
But I truly believe that I only had him. I also only believed I would ever find him if he was a good man.
Yeah.
I never like went crazy searching because I believe the universe would give him to me if he was a good man. I didn't
Yeah.
deserve another heartbreak in that
Mhm.
department.
Mhm.
And so that
Could have
definitely kept
never
me from
expected how good of a man
overly,
though.
yeah, no, no,
No. There's
not
no
at
way.
all. And I forgot what I was just gonna say. So when having him for such a short time,
Mhm.
it got to stay perfect
Mm.
because humans
Or
eventually
not. Yeah.
tarnish
Yeah.
everything that's given to them or take it for granted,
Yeah.
or you go somewhere that's I remember when I first moved upstate in New York, and it was so beautiful here, and now
Yeah.
I don't even see it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and eventually I would have maybe taken it for granted, and
Yeah.
it got to stay perfect. And the
Mhm.
strain of his wife and daughter, to be honest, really weighed heavy on me because
Yeah.
I've already gone through that.
Mhm.
And I don't make anyone like me. Like
Yeah.
I will not chase a relationship
Yeah.
at all. And I don't know how long I could have carried that too,
Hmm.
and or him.
Yeah.
And I think it would have gotten harder in time knowing that I have a dad and all this stuff and
Or
he's
had you
on the
have
other
found
side of
him
the
so
world.
much and like had you have found him so much earlier, like what would that have turned
I
into?
wouldn't I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been prepared. So
Mm.
my stepfather and the timing of everything, honestly, my stepfather and I had it out that November before COVID.
Yeah.
Had it out. Like I said everything I ever needed to say, and we made peace.
Hmm.
If I found my dad, Joe, my bio dad, before my
Yeah.
stepfather and I made that peace, I would
Mm.
have put that baggage of that relationship onto my dad, and he did
Yeah.
not deserve that. I
Mm.
wasn't ready to have my dad yet.
Mm.
And maybe he was, there's a part of me that has always wondered, I know why I got him. Why did he get me?
Mm.
What did
Yeah.
he need?
Yeah.
And I know from my brother that what my brother got from me is a much more open relationship with his dad,
Yeah.
with our dad. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm just raw. So my dad had no choice. Like, I would say,
Yeah.
I love you every time we got off the phone. And he would say it. And
Hmm.
then I learned later, like, that wasn't a thing. That's not what they
Wow.
did in their family.
Wow.
And I brought out a different part of him because I
Mm.
I made him.
Hmm.
It was what it was.
Hmm.
And
Well, and it's interesting, you didn't know him from this young age where you were trained not to behave that way. So, like, you became your own person with your own experiences. You've done all
yeah,
your own work. And by the time you met him, I mean, there's no embarrassment, there's no shame, there's no
no,
nothing. It's just I'm Jamie, the healed version that,
it,
has
it,
done
it
the work.
was such a learning lesson. And I think this is the biggest thing for me of how going back to when I was 8 years old, I didn't make a decision that I was happy with. Like I didn't tell anyone when something had happened, right?
Yeah.
And at 8 years old, I learned from that.
Yeah.
And at 12 years old, I made a different decision. I made the
Yeah.
right one. And all of these choices from if I never got into drugs, I never would have met Kevin. So I
Yeah.
don't give a shit about having been a drug addict. That was the best thing that ever happened to me because
Yeah.
that makes you when you truly get sober, not just dry, but sober, you
Hmm.
have to dig so deep within yourself to get to why you got there to begin with. It has putting down the substance is the easy part.
Hmm.
Working through all the things that got you there is the hard part.
Yeah.
And I didn't need to make amends to people and everything. That was kind of the harder thing is it
Yeah.
was the stuff done to me. It wasn't
Mm.
the stuff I had done to anybody.
Mm.
I wasn't like robbing old ladies and doing
Mm.
all that. It was stuff that was done to me. And then
Yeah.
you can't make somebody apologize to you.
Yeah.
So you have to find peace with
But you
these
can't hold them
things.
accountable, which I think
You
is
can
what
hold
you
them
learned.
accountable.
Hmm.
And I did
Mm.
brutally held him accountable.
Yeah.
And because of that, we're in such a good space. Like he was one of the first calls after my dad died, you
Yeah.
know?
Wow.
And he's like, life gets hard when you get older. And I was like, really, dude, life has always been hard. And I said that because I'm
Fair.
holding you accountable.
Totally fair. Don't even make a little comment like that. I will not keep a response in.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. I
Yeah.
will not let little things like that go because if I
Mm.
do, then I have resentments towards him.
Hmm. Oh,
Like
that's
the
powerful,
dumbest
Jamie.
things
Yeah.
have to be held. The people that didn't reach out when my dad died that should have
Mm.
held them accountable.
Hmm.
Haven't heard from you. You didn't reach out to my kids. Not cool.
Mm.
This
Mm.
is their grandfather. They went
Yeah.
around the world and met him. Like
Yeah.
this
It's
was
been
a
a
real
lot.
thing.
Yeah.
It's
I know
been
it
a
happened
lot.
quickly, but if we took the time to catch up, you'd hear the story. Yeah.
And realizing when I found my dad, like what I was showing up with,
Hmm.
I am like all of my work was now being put to judgment.
Mm.
And I could not have been prouder with the life I got to show up with. And
Oh,
that
that's
was
so beautiful.
all a series of tiny little choices throughout
Yeah.
the whole. Imagine like I
You
didn't
didn't
get
just
clean, he'd be like,
stumble into
oh,
this situation. It was
yeah,
very intentional.
it was very intentional.
Hmm.
And with that, I was able to get through these hard things and not take it on
Yeah.
because I'm a catch. My family's a catch.
Hell yeah, they are.
My kids are the biggest catch.
Hmm.
And if you don't appreciate that or respect that, I'm good.
Sorry for you. Yeah.
Yeah, like if my dad was any kind of way, I wouldn't have gotten on a plane by myself. And when
No.
I knew that was right,
Yeah.
and I knew it was right to not go to his funeral
Hmm. Yeah.
because I needed to be around love.
I think you've
And
handled it, I mean, in the most beautiful, thoughtful, but true to you, not like just the most
totally true to
beautiful,
me.
proper way. Hmm.
Always true to me. And I don't know if that was not always an intentional decision, it just
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And now at 44 of 22 years of sobriety, the numbers thing is very weird in all of
Yeah, it
this.
is very weird.
For the next big thing, the passing of my dad to happen right at 22 years of sobriety. And it's like now I get to go on to the next half of life. I have zero baggage of like
Yeah.
childhood traumas. And that is such a bizarre, light
It makes you wonder what the next
feeling.
22 years have in store because we've done
I
so much
have
work. Like, what could it
no
possibly even
idea.
be?
Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know how to make a vision board right now because there's always
Fair.
been a want. And like,
Mm.
I've never been so content in my entire life that ever see Office, Lisa, have you seen Office Space yet? I've told you so
Mm-mm.
many times you got to watch this movie
No. Uh-uh.
where he's just like, all right, I don't want to do whatever. And like,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I don't know what to do next.
Wow.
It's weird. I like to
Yeah.
sleep in on my day off now. I'm not getting up
Sure.
at 4 a.m. I'm good.
You needed the miracle morning during that
I
period of
apps
time.
that completely changed my life.
What was this quote I just shared? Autumn from Soul Tribe put it on her story and I put it on mine, but it's very relevant to what we're saying right now. So I'm going to pull it up right this second. I just shared it. I read a quote that said, "The universe will never give you peace in something you were never meant to settle in." And that makes so much sense. And so you had those periods of time where you felt so not at peace, so uncomfortable. And it manifested and showed itself in different ways.
Yes.
But you've done the work that now you can settle into the peace because it's right where you're supposed to be.
It's wild. Like before my dad's stuff, it was building the salon. Like there was always like something,
This chase.
and there is no chase right now.
Hmm.
And I am just letting myself be in peace.
Give it
And
some time. Yeah.
now I need to turn into friendships and putting attention
Mm.
into those things and stuff. That's definitely a hard thing for me,
Yeah.
moving so much as a teenager.
You gotta
I'm
establish those. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I was very isolated. Like
Mm.
I was always the new kid outside, and I kind of put myself there now.
Yeah.
And I hate that,
Mm.
but I also don't do anything about it. So it's
Well,
kind of, I don't
we're gonna just
know.
remember that. It's also very fair to, like we said, this timeline is really kind of wild. And I'm grateful, obviously, that you wanted to share. It was like Jamie was thinking about her end of year or whatever, and she was like, I'd like to come on the podcast. But we've said so many things. Maybe a book will exist one day. She does not have it in her to like try. She's kind of gone that route, talk to editors. It's just so much work. And correct me if I'm wrong, is this the first time you've like start to finish, other than just like conversations individually with people, told this story?
Yes, like
So I'm
out.
very proud of you for that
Yes.
because it's a lot and I can't even imagine how it's going to feel for you to listen back to it. But I know all of this has obviously happened for a reason and I have no idea what that's going to look like or what that's going to turn into, but I'm
I
cannot
feel
wait to
that
watch.
too. I feel that too. And I don't know what the reason is, but there's something for this.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's not your job to force it or figure it out.
no, everything has always just kind of come. Like,
Or you follow the little breadcrumbs, like your client talking about the genealogy, or,
yeah.
like a
Yeah.
breadcrumb will present itself. But
Well, one actually has,
what's
which
that?
was interesting. A woman that I worked with in Pravana, she lives up in Buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
and she sent me a message recently and said, I'm having somebody come into my salon. She owns suites up there, and she's an energy like stylist kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. I'm not even sure what that entails.
Yeah.
She goes, but all I could think of when I was thinking of doing this is you.
Mm.
And I feel like you're supposed to be doing this. Um, when I set up the date, let me know if you're interested, and you could come and take the thing in
I
her.
love that.
So
Maybe we'll have you
yeah,
back once we know what that entails.
I don't even know, definitely, I feel like I come from a little bit of a different space when it comes to some of this energy stuff,
Yeah.
or like coaching stuff. Um, I'm more of like a raw. Like,
You
I'm
just
gonna
don't want
tell
the
you to cut
fluff.
it
You don't
out,
want
or
the
no,
bullshit.
I don't. I
Yeah.
just can't.
You've done the healing, but you've also had your time wasted by a lot of therapists and a lot of like, it's
Yeah,
hard to
yeah.
find that. It's hard to do the work, but find the right path without all the junk
Oh, all
mixed
the
in.
junk. Yeah, yeah.
It is.
Um, the junk never helped. The tough love
Mm-mm.
helped. As
Mm.
much as like my mom moving and whatever, I can curse that all day, but that made me who I am. I had to
Yeah,
figure
I
that
love
shit
that.
out, and
Mm.
people are very pampered nowadays with having
Hmm.
to figure things out. And
Hmm. We don't like to feel
sometimes you just have
uncomfortable.
no, and being uncomfortable is my favorite place to be. And
Hmm.
now being
You're
comfortable
like,
is
what am I
weird.
doing
I don't
here?
know what to do
Yeah.
with this. I'm
Mm.
so used to being uncomfortable. I'm so
Hmm.
used to having digging in deep to myself as my comfort zone. And now
Mm.
there's like it's done. Like, oh, we should journal. I don't have anything to write down. Yeah, I had a
I
good day.
processed all this shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's good. And
Well,
I know the
I'm
other shoe will drop eventually just because
mm-hmm.
it does. And I want to stay in this right now while
Yeah.
I can
Yep. This is the
before,
moment we're in. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for you coming on and sharing. I think we did go a little over an hour, and that's totally fine. I'll figure
Thanks
that
for
out
having
with
me, Lisa.
editing. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we covered that so perfectly and so beautifully. And I don't know if you want to have a podcast one day. I feel like I could listen to you talk for weeks. Like you have so many stories. There were so many times I wanted to interrupt and be like, "Tell me that that day, just that day." Like I want to hear it all. But obviously we don't have time for this. So maybe we'll have you back on again one day. But I'm just appreciating, like I said in the beginning, this wasn't a business thing. This wasn't a here's the perfectly packaged lesson and all of that. I mean, obviously we heard a lot of it, but this is just like your truth and it's really cool. And I feel honored to be able to give you a spot to just share your
Thank you
truth.
so much for giving me a spot to do this. I think I could only have done this with you. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you, friend. Love you.
Love you.